Hey y'all, Michelle Johnson again. Welcome back to my studio. Today we're going to be looking for patterns, and specifically patterns in watercolor. Do you ever spend the day looking at the sky, glancing up at the clouds, finding shapes and recognizable objects? I love doing that, and that's what we're going to be doing today, but with watercolor. You don't need to have fancy supplies for this tutorial. You can have artist grade supplies if you'd like, but I'm going to also show you this tutorial using Crayola watercolors, which are easily available everywhere and may even be in your child's closet somewhere. I recommend, if you have both of those, try it with both qualities of paint. I was surprised at the outcome of this, and I think you will be too. I'm also going to be showing this tutorial to you on a variety of different levels of paper, both 100% cotton paper and a student grade cellulose, much less expensive paper. Again, I think you'll be surprised that really wonderful art can be made from any kind of supplies. So rather than me continuing to talk, let's make some patterns with watercolor. And in those patterns of watercolor, we're also going to be making bookmarks, because I love to make gifts out of my art exploration. So without further ado, let's find some patterns. The first thing we need to do is cut our paper down to size. I'm using a Fiskars paper cutter, and I'm making my bookmarks 2 3/8 inches by 7 inches so that they will fit in these neat envelopes that I have that are acid-free and lignin-free, so that the people who receive my bookmarks can keep them for as long as they want. I'm using 2 types of paper today, Canson XL, the less expensive paper, and Arches, a much more expensive paper. Arches is 100% cotton and Canson has 0 cotton in it. It is a cellulose paper. As you just saw, I'm also using frog tape. It's basically what you use to paint houses. I use it for painting paintings because I have a ton of it from when my husband and I thought we were going to paint our kitchen, and it turns out 10 years later we still haven't started. You see my hands going off screen every once in a while, and that's because I'm taking my tape and I'm putting it onto my clothing, in this case my jeans, and I'm letting some of that adhesive stick to the fabric so that it doesn't stick to the paper. That is how I use painter's tape that's not designed for watercolor paper to make sure it doesn't take off the paper when I take the tape off the paper. That was a lot of offs and takes, but I hope you understood. I'm getting all my paint prepared here. I'm using a variety of pigments: Holbein's Shadow Green, Van Gogh's Payne's Gray, Sennelier's Payne's Gray, Van Gogh's Indigo, and then Crayola. And I'll have all those links down below so you don't need to worry about what they are right now. Then I'm also using a size 4 quill brush by Princeton. It's a Neptune brush that holds lots of water. I'm also using a Mottler brush by Princeton, and that's what I wetted my paper with. You want to make sure that paper is really wet, and then you want to, while that paper is wet, take your paint and take it in there. And notice how fast I'm moving. That's after that paint's down. You have just the right kinds of colors in that bookmark. Get that salt and sprinkle it around. Don't even think about it. Just lay it down, and the patterns are going to come. There's really no good way to control salt on watercolor. Now I'm going over to the Canson XL paper, doing the same process of wetting it again, and that's with my Mottler brush. Now I'm going to my Crayolas, and I want to mix up kind of a turquoise-ish, that's a hard word to say, blue, and I'm just painting it down. And then you'll notice that the paint is performing differently. This is because it's Crayola, but it's also because it's on Canson's paper, which again does not have any cotton in it. It's not bad, it's just different. The performance is much more flat. Now I'm going to put the salt down. This is also another place where it's going to differ. Look at the salt. It is already responding to the water and the pigment much faster than it did over there in the Arches using the artist quality paint. This whole thing has dried an entire day before I tried to take off the salt and before I tried to take off the paper. The tape, excuse me. Now you'll notice as I take off the painter's tape, I'm going at an angle and not straight down and not up. That's to help it not take off the paper when you take the tape off. A few of my bookmarks had some places where the paint got outside of the tape, and to fix that, to clean that up, I just used a little bit of water and my Princeton Velvet Touch scrubber brush, and it erased those marks perfectly. From here, I need to look at all the different patterns that the salt made on these different papers using different paint. In this one here, which is on the Canson paper, I see leaves, like holly leaves or maple leaves, and I think I know where I'm gonna go with that one. With this one, I do feel flowers, and I'm not entirely certain which orientation I like best. I'm feeling this because I like the upward movement, because when I turn it this direction, I feel like all the shapes are flowing down, and I prefer this upward momentum. So that's a really interesting thing. I'm thinking I almost want to define these petal shapes, because you see there's the center and the petal. There's the centers and the petals. It's really fun. It's kind of like cloud watching. I'm feeling very spatial, intergalactic, if you will. But isn't it fun to look through and find recognizable patterns within this crazy science experiment, art science experiment of paper, pigment, and salt? Now that I've found the patterns within the watercolor and the salt, I need to define them. I've decided I'm going to do that through gouache. This is a watercolor gouache. I'm going to take a very fine brush. I do believe I'm choosing a size 03, and I'm just going to draw in the shapes that I see. I go through very slowly, even though this is really hyperlapsed, and I'm just having a great time defining those shapes, adding some details, making the imagination of what I see become real. On the leaf one, I do something similar. I wanted to go with the veins instead of the outside, because the outside of the shape was really well defined with the way the pigment and the salt separated on the watercolor paper. It just is so fabulous. Remember, that's the Crayola. Next, on the flower one, I was going to go with acrylic gouache for the stems. It's a really, really vibrant green, and acrylic gouache is really fun to use with watercolor. They worked really well together. They're both very, very matte, but I knew it wasn't going to have a hard time laying down on this really rough Arches paper. I went back and looked at both of my bookmarks, and I just felt the need to add some black line details. Here I'm defining the leaves and the veins just a little bit more, kind of providing a shadow-like look to the veins. I felt something similar over here, but before I went, I was trying to take my time and don't add too much detail, Michelle. Let it sit. Look back at it again. So since I still wanted to work on this project, I decided I will start the lettering. And whenever I do lettering, I put a piece of paper underneath that has the words right there for me to see. I am a fabulous speller, but when I do lettering where it has to be perfect, I can magically misplace I's and E's, and I can forget to put T's. So I had that phrase right up there. Time with books is always well spent, so I wouldn't forget. I eventually started to feel a need to define the bookmark, and I've always found the best way to define something is to outline it. And so that's what I did, just doing a simple outline around the edges of my watercolor. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm using my favorite pen, a Rotring pen. It's a technical pen, which is why you'll see I'm constantly kind of meddling with the nib. It's not designed to work on watercolor paper, and so it occasionally was picking up some fibers. I like to take those fibers off and just wipe them off onto the side, and then it will work perfectly for the rest of the project. After letting it sit for a little while, I came back and looked at this darker blue flowered bookmark, and I'm like, it does need a little more color. I want red centers on this piece, and now it's perfect. Well, I hope you enjoyed this time looking for patterns, and that you did it too, that you didn't just watch me, but you went and got some paper, some paint, and you found yourself some patterns. I plan to give these 2 bookmarks to some wonderful people in my life. As I was going through this tutorial, it really struck me I know who I want to give these to. But this one, I started using the paint left over from the other bookmark on the back. And I'm really loving this doodle I've started. I want to finish the spatial side of this. I'm thinking I'm going to make this a double-sided bookmark for myself because there is no shame in taking your art and your art time and making something fun for your own use. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with friends that you know might be interested, and if you would like, even subscribe. I mean, if you're enjoying what I'm doing here, there's going to be more of it, especially in the new year.